I think in 1987, there were something like 198 serial killers, and today there's supposedly only 12. But I don't know if that's true because I work a lot of cases, and I've, in the past month, have encountered at least 2 technical serial killers, but they weren't prosecuted for the murders that they committed, so they're not being caught.
You've reached American History Hotline. You ask the questions, we get the answers. Leave a message.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential, and it's also elusive. But now, there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin.
Have surprises?
Many surprises. Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up?
You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst.
It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
30 years ago, an island off Manhattan almost brought down New York City.
Who will you trust? Your friends and neighbors? Or will you trust the people 5 miles overseas?
This is a story about neighbors turning on each other and what happens when a forgotten place decides it's had enough.
But we're not stopping, are we?
Listen to Revisionist History, The Staten Island Problem on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey there, American History Hotliners. Bob Crawford here, thrilled to be joining you again for another episode of American History Hotline. We love all your questions, so keep them coming. And remember to send us a question, record yourself with a voice memo or a video on your phone, and email it to americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. That's americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. Okay, now to today's question. It's a bit of a dark one. It's about serial killers. Here to help me answer the question is Catherine Townsend. She's the host of the podcasts Hell and Gone, Murderline, and Red Collar.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to be here and very excited to talk about this.
Yeah, we're excited to speak with you about it. Okay, Catherine, here's the question we were hoping you could help us answer. It's from Dave in San Luis Obispo, California. He writes, why were there so many serial killers in the 70s? And are there fewer today? Now, Catherine, I imagine there are a lot of reasons for this, so let's just start with a definition. What is a serial killer?
So technically, a serial killer is someone who kills 3 or more victims with a cooling off period, which differentiates it from something like a mass shooting, where there's more than 3 victims, but it's, all at once. That's the technical definition. And I can talk a little bit about why I think that serial killers have been very pigeonholed since the 70s, in my opinion, but we can get into that later.
Okay, so then what are some of the traits? You talked about three or more murders and then a break.
Right.
Dig into that a little bit.
Well, so in other words, I think that when we watch shows like Mindhunter and we talk about, the FBI criminal profilers, we think of serial killers as the traditional lone wolf, white male killer who stalks and needs to kill. And, these are people like Ted Bundy or Ed Gein. And I think that's what the public has thought of as a serial killer for a really long time. But what we're coming to find out is that a lot of that is actually not true. For example, I was reading that only about 50% or so of serial killers are white. There are a lot of other, minority groups represented there. But unfortunately, I think that people just weren't focusing on catching them, or for other reasons, weren't really looking for these victims. You have things like the Atlanta child killer. And in that case, you have multiple African-American victims, but no one was looking for these people for a long time. And so I think that there could be a lot more out there than people realize, actually. The statistics tell us that I think in 1987, there were something like 198 serial killers, and today there are supposedly only 12. But I don't know if that's true because I work a lot of cases, and I've, in the past month, have encountered at least 2 technical serial killers, but they weren't prosecuted for the murders that they committed, so they're not being caught.
So you're saying right now out there somewhere, there are at least 12 active serial killers.
That's what the research says, yes. And when we talk about why there are fewer now than since the 70s, if in fact that's true, which is another question, I think there are a lot of reasons. I've seen everything from lead and lead pipes blamed to a lot of the serial killers coming up in the 70s and 80s were the children of Vietnam veterans. And those people experienced a lot of PTSD. There was less mental health in the home, talk about mental health. So maybe these children were abused. There are a lot of theories. For my money, it comes down to, I do another podcast called Red Collar, where it's all about white collar criminals who kill. And when you talk about the triangle of fraud, okay, you've got opportunity, pressure, rationalization. So pressure and rationalization are things that come from within. You can, just like a serial killer, you can rationalize it. You have this emotional need to do it. The big thing that we can't control is opportunity. And opportunity really, for me, is about the victim pool. Back in the 70s and 80s, you had this huge pool of victims, mainly, a lot of hitchhikers. And you also had sex workers who were kind of off the grid. You still have that today. You had a lot less ability to DNA test. None of the law enforcement agencies talk to each other in the way they do now. So you have less cohesiveness there. And I think it was kind of this perfect storm that allowed these people to, if they felt like killing someone, get away with it.
A lot of people point to Ed Gein, right, as the first serial killer, but we know there were others before. H.H. Holmes, who gained notoriety through Eric Larson's book, The Devil in the White City. Can we say who was the first, let's say, American serial killer? Because H.H. Holmes was active around the time of Jack the Ripper in London, correct?
Yes. So honestly, I don't think we know about the first serial killer. There was, and it might have been after H.H. Holmes, but it was, there was this guy, Albert Fish, who killed a lot of children and wasn't found until much later. But I think
what time period was he?
I can't exactly remember. I want to say the 1930s. So that would have been later.
Okay.
But that's kind of someone I think of as being an early serial killer. But I don't think we know about the first serial killers. I think they've been around a really long time doing bad things. But the problem is the technology to catch them didn't exist. And again, law enforcement agencies didn't talk to each other the way they did now. There was no national database. For a long time before there were computers, each individual police agency was researching things on paper, and they would have to wait months and years to get results back. So I think that had a lot to do with it. It was much easier to kill someone in one geographical area and then get away with it.
So if we're trying to figure out what creates a critical mass, right, of serial killers in one decade or in one time period, we talk about the scars of war and those coming home and children being emotionally and neglected and abused, and then they grow up and they become serial killers. H.H. Holmes, or maybe lead poisoning. Maybe H.H. Holmes was the victim of lead poisoning. But if we see these serial killers in different decades, maybe what makes a serial killer isn't time sensitive, right? Isn't to one era. Maybe it's a human flaw.
I think it is. And I also think that it's a big question is, look, these people are asking themselves, what's my chances of getting caught? Will I get away with this? And we see this over all types of crime. And the fact is, during the 70s and 80s, they had a much better chance of getting away with it than they do today. Also, we haven't even talked about things like DNA technology and the ability to catch people months and years later. The fact of the matter is, if you killed somebody in the 70s and 80s, especially if it was a victim, sadly, a lot of these people who were targeted were sex workers. No one was looking for these people. Mm-hmm. So if they would have a really good chance of getting away with it. I mean, the crime clearance rate today actually is only about 50 to 60%. And that's not even counting all the people who are out there missing. So I do think that in general today, killers are much more aware of technology, and they know that they will probably not get away with it and they might get caught, and DNA might get them months or years later.
Let's jump to the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
Who were some of the serial killers who were active at this time?
Well, you had Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. You had Ted Bundy. You had Bueno and Bianchi, the Hillside Stranglers. You had, I suppose, during the same time, the Golden State Killer. There were lots of serial killers during that era. And then you also had, this was more recent, but you had the Long Island serial killer on the East Coast. So these guys got away with it for a long time. And they were pretty brazen about picking women up. I think that's also the other factor that comes into this when we talk about the victim pool. You're also talking about the 60s and 70s, a time period when many more young women are going out into the workforce and going to hang out in groups or by themselves. And hitchhiking is a huge factor.
Yeah, talk about the automobile, right? And that as a tool of stalking and a tool of killing.
Well, the hitchhiking trend was before my time. But whenever I talk to my parents or I talk to people who, were around back then, they talk about how common it was to get a ride. It was people just thought nothing of hitching a ride, getting a ride somewhere. And if someone picked you up and took you somewhere you didn't want to go, there was no cell phone or GPS or anything like that. You literally disappeared and you were just gone. And also compound that with the fact that a lot of these people, sometimes there were people who were free spirits and maybe they'd left home. And so they weren't missed right away, which is another problem because then you miss the critical 24 to 48 hours. Yeah, the automobile is like the perfect tool for a serial killer, really, because it lets people entice their victim in and they have them in their environment. And then they can, they have control of the situation. They can take them away from the primary location.
When you think about the late 60s, and there were a lot of kids who were running away from home and going to San Francisco or, free love and everything we think about with that era, it seems, and even into the 70s, there was this lost generation, right? So it was really about opportunity and targets. It seems like it would be a prime time.
Oh yeah. Think about it. If you're sort of, hippie, free love, going to a rock show or something like that, and then you disappear, you've got kind of, again, like a perfect storm of events. First of all, people wouldn't necessarily be alarmed right away and start looking for you. There's no way to trace, there's no cell phones, there's no surveillance cameras back then. I think people now in this generation have a hard time even imagining how free it was. You could disappear for a few days and no one would hear from you, and that was not unusual. Right. I feel like now also that's another thing. People use cell phones. People are much more, even if they are free spirits, they're in communication somehow often. Yeah. Or you can track their location or something. I travel around all the time, all around the world. And my mom is always saying, please just at least share your location with us. And I kind of laugh because when I was 16 years old, I lived in Paris. There was no way for my parents to find me. They would hear from me once a week when I called on a phone card. And I'm always thinking about how lucky I am. Anything could have happened to me, really.
Right.
I mean, it just takes a lot longer. There was longer lags in communication.
Yeah, and there are things now with, if you have kids, you have Life 360, and you have at the iPhone, you can set it up where you know where your child is at all times, or at least where their cell phone is at all times.
Yeah, you know where their device is,
right?
Which is a whole other thing. But I agree. I think that, and I think also it's not only that parents have used it. I mean, I think for the most part, a lot of people feel that it is a safety feature that they want for that reason. And we had nothing like that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. That was just non-existent. So it took much longer. And also even things like Amber Alerts are pretty recent.
Right.
So there was no way of knowing someone was missing. And there was this whole, you have to wait 24 or 48 hours, which is no longer true. But sadly, a lot of stuff got missed in those crucial time periods.
So the more you learn about some of these killers like John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer, we're getting into the 80s and 90s now, the more you realize how sloppy they were.
Oh, yeah. These were not master criminals. They had luck and they had a lot of opportunity with their victim pool. Like, okay, Jeffrey Dahmer is a really good example because a lot of people who he encountered were leading double lives. Sadly, due to that time period, a lot of them were not, out. They were not gay openly. And so that was also another opportunity. If they're not telling someone in their lives, the people closest to them, what's actually going on, then it becomes hard to investigate because then you've got to figure out that whole aspect. And again, no cell phones, no tracking devices. Yeah, they were very sloppy. I mean, he was leaving body parts in his kitchen. And it's that whole thing is just so sad.
Are there examples that you can think of where the cops had these people in their, basically in their clutches and let them go?
Well, Jeffrey Dahmer, one of his victims was 14 years old and didn't speak English and got away from him and was running naked through the streets. And the police actually brought the 14-year-old back to Jeffrey Dahmer's place and he ended up killing him. And that to me is incredibly tragic. I think there was a lot less. Also, I think in general, there was just police saw it, unfortunately, as some sort of lover's spat they didn't want to get involved with. And they didn't protect this child, which is also tragic.
What's up, fam? I'm sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together and iHeart Women's Sports.
Because let's be real, women's sports is giving us way too much to talk about these days.
The highlights, the rivalries, the breakout stars, the moments that take over your entire timeline.
And the conversations that start during the game and somehow keep going all week.
Every week, we're breaking down the biggest stories across women's sports.
We'll give you our takes, our debates, and probably a few disagreements.
We'll talk to athletes, celebrate big moments, and get into what's happening on and off the field, court, track, and beyond.
Because we're not just interested in what happened, we're interested in why everyone's talking about it. Because everyone watches women's sports. So if you're already a fan,
or you're just getting into the game, there's a seat for you right here.
Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Hoda Kotb, host of the podcast Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb. Okay, if you know me, you know this. I'm always searching for inspiration, for support, and useful tools to help maximize joy. So this podcast lets us uncover all of that together. We're going to have these meaningful conversations with the world's most fascinating people, like when actress Olivia Munn shared how she overcame fierce health challenges that she never saw coming.
I've gone through breast cancer and then helped my mother through breast cancer, and that was more difficult. There's a lot of people who understand postpartum depression. I was not prepared for postpartum anxiety.
Olympic champ Shawn Johnson revealed why she had no choice but to be a gymnast.
There was something about gymnastics that was intoxicating to me. It's given me a belief that we all have one of those treasures inside of us. We just have to find it.
Listen to Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with the one, the only, and the one, Michael Bublé.
You guys, I'm genuinely a huge fan. Like, It's funny, I made a whole thing about doing this TikTok where I got you guys to sign the guitar, but right. It was real. Like, we listen to in the car all the time. Like, it literally is hanging up with all your signatures.
Wow. I am so honored. After Kevin's recent, let's call it interesting confession about Michael, I had a feeling this wasn't going to be going away. We figured there was only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they're like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal. Like, what a man got to do? What a man got to do?
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Do you have a hockey rink in your house?
I do.
Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke and Yerin, Samira y Gracie. I'm so excited.
On a bouncy bed.
You have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to Suite 305, where the group chat comes to life. What up? Es como que una forma de decir como, hola amiga, hola mejor amiga, hola hermana, what up?
Mira, nunca lo había hablado con nadie. Excepto con mis hijos. Mis hijos sí saben. Yes.
Sé mi amante.
Uf. Punch. Qué increíble. Ya, la telenovela.
You're the only person I know that loves a yellow starburst.
It's lemonade.
No hay alguien que te falta, como que tú dices, me gustaría colaborar con esta persona. This is Suite 305. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons as part of my Cultura podcast network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on the Disgraceland podcast, I explore the wild lives of rock stars and unbelievable true crime stories from music history. These are the stories you haven't heard, the kind you'll end up telling someone else. Like the time Paul McCartney spent in one of the world's most notorious prisons. Imagine that. You're Paul McCartney. It's 1980. You're an ex-Beatle, and you're doing time in one of Japan's worst prisons, right there alongside Yakuza gangsters, and for a ridiculous charge. Or the bizarre crime Lady Gaga is accused of. Who is the artist Lady Gaga is being accused of doing the unthinkable to, after allegedly stealing her music and style to become famous? And what about that time Blondie's Debbie Harry escaped a serial killer? The man who had given her that ride she barely escaped from was Ted Bundy. Listen to Disgraceland on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is American History Hotline. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Today, my guest is Catherine Townsend. She's the host of the podcasts Helen Gone, Murderline, and Red Collar. We're talking about why the 1970s was rife with serial killers. Remember, send us your burning questions about American history to americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. You can leave us a voice memo message. You can write us an email if you want, make us a video. Just send it to americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Let's talk about the victims of these killers. You mentioned the poor young boy who the cops took back to Jeffrey Dahmer and then he killed him. We talked about racial minorities, gay or sex workers. Talk about the police and the overlooking of the marginalized in the late 20th century.
Well, the sad thing about the overlooking of marginalized people is that it's still happening today. I do think it's gotten better. There's more education, but it's something that I see. I cover 48 cases a year or something like that, and I see it all the time. I think that there are a few things going on. I think that sometimes, as with the Jeffrey Dahmer example, the police see a situation and just they don't want to get involved in some sort of subculture maybe they don't understand. And so they just won't get involved. Sometimes, often both with sex workers, but also just with teenage girls who disappear, there's this attitude of, oh, well, they were dating a bunch of different people and, maybe they'll come back. Or they treat it as if there's still quite a bit of victim blaming that goes on, in my opinion.
That's what this sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Like our whole conversation,
I was working on a case where one of my first big cases, and I literally had the investigator saying, we're talking about a 22-year-old college student who had been staying with her boyfriend but had been dating some other people, went missing. And he made the comment, he said, well, with the lifestyle she was living, what did she expect? And I was actually stunned because I just thought, I can't believe this is where we are in 2018. But it still happens. And I feel like a lot of people are just not being looked for. But then from the other side, they're not being reported missing either right away. And that's a big problem for an investigation. That does make things a lot harder. In the police's defense, that makes things a lot harder.
I can't stop thinking about these active cases. Like here, I thought we were going to talk about the past, and we have, and we will. But, according to you and speaking to you, it's like this is a very immediate threat. This is happening right now more than we think it is, more than we realize it is.
Yeah, I think when I say that, I'm talking about things like, using the example of the case I've been working on, you have an individual, and maybe it doesn't fit into the stereotypical man who needs to kill and he's targeting women. What actually happens is some of these people it's not that they necessarily need to kill, but they want what they want and they'll do it. And they will absolutely kill someone if that person steps in the way of what they want. The example I'm talking about is a case where a man killed 2 people, was charged with murder, but then the police lost the DNA. So over a period of time, there was one victim, there was another victim years later. One was his landlord, one was someone else who he got into an argument with. Then he ended up breaking into a woman's apartment and beating and killing her, seriously injuring her boyfriend. And we think there might be a 4th person he's responsible for. So it's not what you'd think of as a traditional serial killer. He wasn't stalking and killing just female victims, but he's killed a lot of people, but he's not called a serial killer. So I just feel like there's a lot of people out there who may be technical serial killers who are not getting counted.
You're almost saying that we need to redefine what makes a serial killer.
Right. Or just think of it can still be someone who's had 3 victims with a cooling off period. But I definitely think that, for example, also a lot of the white collar cases I work on that then turns to murder, I think people kill people for a lot of reasons. It's not always the sexual sadist, rapist, predator. There was a really good example of that. I don't know if you ever saw the Netflix series The Serpent, but it was really good. It was about a serial killer who was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, living in Nepal and all these different places. And he very much capitalized on the free love vibe that was going on during that time. And he was able to kind of scam people. But then when they would find out about his scams, he really just wanted to steal money, but he killed a lot of them. He had a lot of victims. So I think there are a lot of people like that floating around out there, sadly.
How many women serial killers have you come across?
I mean, I've never really interviewed a female serial killer. Well, maybe one.
Well, wait, have you interviewed a serial killer?
No. I was thinking about someone who's had a couple victims, but technically she's not a serial killer. I've definitely interviewed female killers. And I was thinking of one because I believe she might actually be a serial killer, but I can't prove it. I think that women traditionally, most female serial killers are not like Aileen Wuornos. And I think that case has been hugely publicized. She kind of killed her victims in more what you might think of as a male fashion. I'm not trying to be sexist, but just saying, she used a weapon. They were kind of violent. Most female
give us some
serial
context
killers,
if our listeners don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a minute.
So Aileen Wuornos was a female serial killer. She was the one who was portrayed in the movie Monster by Charlize Theron. She had several victims, and she'd had this really tragic life. She had been sexually assaulted and raped by men in her own family. She became a sex worker. And in a way, a lot of people think of her as kind of a sympathetic character because she lured some men who were clients of hers into the car with her, and then she murdered them. And it was usually pretty violent. She would shoot them. She would kill them in ways that were thought of as more of a male way of killing. Because typically experts say that men are more violent and women are more kind of, I want to say, this is going to sound wrong, but low key. Women do a lot more poisoning because honestly, I think women get away with it more, in my personal opinion, because they are pretty subtle about it. And we've had so many cases of female nurses who've killed multiple patients and things like that. And I've had several cases that I've reported on where a woman will kill several husbands. Or you have people like Belle Guinness who would lure her boarders in. She had a boarding house and then she would kill people and bury them in the yard. Again, that was more of a fraud case. She just wanted the money, but
right.
At some point she had to get rid of the bodies.
We did a past episode on serial poisoners.
Yeah, that's...
So before all the age of CSI we live in now, right, with all the forensic tools, before that, in the 70s, how did police track a serial killer? Because you talked about that critical 48 hours being,
right,
impossible. So how did these detectives and police eventually find the killers?
Most of them did a lot of what I do, because most of my cases very few have physical evidence we can see or use anyway. They did old school detective, gumshoe, pounding the pavement, detective noir police work, where they went out, they talked to people on the streets, they developed sources, and they just kept following leads. And for example, I'm thinking of the Hillside Strangler case. They went and literally talked to all of these women. They went into the community. They knew the community. They got their sources. And then that's how they got, heard about rumors of these weird guys who were kind of out there. And then they just followed those leads. They had much less to work with.
Let's talk about some of the people who are serial killers, but kind of not serial killers. And you kind of already alluded to this, like Charles Manson.
Right.
He never actually killed anyone, or did he?
Right. I think of him more as a cult leader. Myself. I think of Charles Manson more as a cult leader. He certainly, I would say, was responsible for those deaths and had a part in them. But you're right. He never actually did it. But then what do you call people who, for example, will hire someone, they'll hire a hitman. Well, they didn't actually do it, but they definitely masterminded it. I feel like he was masterminding it. So I guess it's the same kind of thing.
When I was in college in the 90s, early 90s, two guys I knew on spring break went to visit John Wayne Gacy in jail. What is it about the fascination that we all have for serial killers? Because you have two podcasts. There are endless movies about serial killers, television shows, documentaries, books. True crime is so popular. What is it about the non-killers' curiosity about the serial killer?
I don't know. Since I was a child, I started out reading all the Ann Rule true crime books. I am fascinated by those things, but I sort of turn it on its head a little bit. I'm much more interested in the victims, how they survived, how they figured things out, how to solve the mystery than I am in the killers, because the truth is they're not very interesting. They're really not. They're superficially charming maybe at best. But like you said, most of the time they just got really lucky. I mean, John Wayne Gacy literally had a graveyard underneath his house, and he was actually very sloppy. He just happened to get lucky in that no one was maybe looking for those people or thought that he would have done it, and he just kind of got lucky. I don't know why people are so fascinated with him. I don't find that interesting, to be totally honest.
Yeah, it was crazy that these guys did this, and I think he gave them some of his paintings.
He gave them some paintings? The clown paintings?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I do, but it's the same thing with, it's not exactly the same, but with prison pen pals. I mean, I end up in my job writing a lot of people in prison because it's by necessity. But, I'm always amazed at how many women want to be in relationships with these guys. And that does kind of blow me away. I'll be honest.
What is it about? You've spoken to some of these women, right? I mean, have you ever
Maybe
spoken?
it's the same reason people keep... Yeah, we actually have, I'm sorry to bring it back to my cases, but it is wild. We have one right now where when this guy, he's in his 40s now, when he was 17 years old, he killed his entire family. All right. And there's overwhelming evidence. I've seen the case file. He clearly did it. He threw a party. He killed his young sister, his stepfather, and his mother, covered the bodies up, threw a party, had high school people over partying for a week. And I mean, it was pretty horrific. And then he's been in jail for a long time, but because in Arkansas, the law changed and now he's eligible for release, he's going to get released. And this woman who keeps calling us is so convinced that he didn't do it. And I keep saying, did you read the case file? At least read the case file. You have children, please read the case file. And she's just completely believes he's the best thing ever. Maybe it's not to be flippant. Maybe it's the same thing when people want to raise wild animals or something. It's just it's this need to have a sort of dark, dramatic thing in your life that's sort of safely caged, right? So you kind of get the drama.
I can fix them. I can train them.
Yeah,
I can heal them.
It. And if not, they're behind bars, so they're telling you everything you want to hear anyway. Maybe it's that. I truly don't understand. I was single for a long time, wondering what I was doing wrong because, every serial killer in prison I knew had a partner or multiple partners.
Even the serial killers are in love.
Ew, and I'm like, I can't get a date. I mean, this is, and these guys are literally, I mean, they've got 10 or 15 women on the hook. What am I doing wrong?
Have you you talk about you and you say we, like you have a staff, and forgive me for not knowing all the details, but have you solved? I mean, have you convinced law enforcement that, this person is a serial killer? Have you solved cases?
It wasn't a serial killer, but yeah, our first season of Hell and Gone involved the murder of a 22-year-old girl in the Arkansas Ozarks who was a friend of my sister's. Long story short, we went in. We had absolutely no access to the case file. We went out and did all of our own investigating. And when I say we, it was a small staff. It was me, a couple of producers, and but I was mainly the one in the field, most of the time for months at a time. Anyway, we ended up the original investigator on the case who told me to mind my own business, and that investigations were grown-up stuff was removed from the case somehow. And after that, a new investigator came in and the case was solved in 9 months. This case was solved in 9 months, and now there's someone in jail convicted for that. So now, will the Arkansas State Police ever admit that we helped solve it? No, they'll tell you that after 16 years, it was a coincidence. I know we did. I know we helped, and that makes me very proud. I don't care if we solved it or not. I just know that we helped, and that's all I've ever wanted to do.
I'm sure it gave you inspiration to keep going. And keep finding more of these. So we started out, and you've answered this a couple times during our conversation, but it's like, is our serial killers an American thing? Is it, or do we see them all over? Because you mentioned someone in Nepal. Of course, we know Jack the Ripper. Is it like gun violence? There's more of it in America, but it's not just exclusive to America?
I think serial killers are worldwide. I've certainly seen examples. I'm just thinking about even things that I've read in the past few years. Russia, Japan. Although in Japan, it is more rare, again, just because there's cameras everywhere. The UK, certainly even today, there are serial killers. I do think that fewer people become serial killers today because they're caught earlier. And I think the UK is a really good example of that because there have been a couple, like, for example, there's one called the Camden Ripper who was killing and dismembering people. But I don't know that he was technically a serial killer because there's CCTV everywhere. When you go to the UK, it's wall-to-wall CCTV. So usually they're able to, apprehend people before they actually technically kill that third person. So you probably have a lot of people who would have become serial killers, but they get caught earlier.
Well, and getting to this, and we've talked about this throughout our conversation as well, but getting to the second part of Dave's question, which is, are there fewer serial killers today?
It's a really hard question to answer. I'm not avoiding it. I don't know. I think that, research will tell you, studies will tell you that there are. There probably are. At the same time, you got to look at where the homicide clearance rates are going. There are fewer homicides being cleared now. Somewhere
What do you
around
mean by being cleared?
So that's the thing. When the police give these statistics and they say you have a certain percentage of homicides that are cleared, it doesn't necessarily mean they're solved and the person's behind bars. All that it means is, I believe that the police have basically gone as far as they can in that investigation, and either the people are dead who might be responsible or they can't find them. I mean, they literally will mark it cleared, meaning, but it might not be solved. So you've got that, first of all, and then it's only about 60%, 50 to 60% are cleared. That doesn't include all the missing people out there. So that means you've got about a 1 in 2 chance of getting away with murder. Yeah, you got a 50-50 chance of getting away with murder in America based on where you are. And that's a little scary, to be honest with you. I mean, when you watch shows like CSI and Law & Order, you're not seeing that. So I do think that there are potentially more people out there, I think they're, and plus, what about all the missing people? A lot of them are probably not alive, but they're not officially getting counted.
Right.
So I do think there are fewer serial killers. I do think the technology at catching them earlier has gotten better, but I don't think that we should rest easy.
We certainly won't be resting easy here, but it has been nice and easy having a conversation with you. I've been talking to Catherine Townsend. She's host of the podcast Hell and Gone, Murderline, and Red Collar. Give her a call sometime. Catherine, thanks for joining us today on American History Hotline.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to American History Hotline, a production of iHeart Podcasts and Scratch Track Productions. The show's executive producer is James Morrison. Our executive producers from iHeart are Jordan Runtall and Jason English. Original music composed by me, Bob Crawford. Please keep in touch. Our email is americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. If you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Feel free to hit me up on social media to ask a history question or to let me know what you think of the show. You can find me at Bob Crawford Base. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential and it's also elusive. But now there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Suite 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up?
You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst.
It's lemonade.
This is Suite 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
30 years ago, an island off Manhattan almost brought down New York City.
Who will you trust? Your friends and neighbors? Or will you trust the people 5 miles overseas?
This is a story about neighbors turning on each other and what happens when a forgotten place decides it's had enough.
But we're not stopping, are we?
Listen to Revisionist History, The Staten Island Problem on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.